And we are back live here at the SANS Expo and Convention Center in Singapore for Innovfest Unbound 2018. I'm Mark Laudi, coming to you in this live stream on the Accenture YouTube channel from the Accenture exhibit. One of the interesting topics of conversation here, thanks to the Minister talking about AI, artificial intelligence, is how do we go about creating ethical AI and make sure that while AI realizes all its potential, that things don't get out of hand. For that, I'm joined by Adam Burden, who's the Group Technology Officer at Accenture. And you are the real thing, I assume, Adam?
I am the real thing.
You're the real thing, you're not
I'm not artificial intelligence.
You're not a virtual being, or even though that's what you're strong on. Let's focus on this question of ethics. Recently, you'll be aware, there were 16 technology chiefs who got together and said, we got to stop AI. This is dangerous. Do you agree?
So what we agree with is that it's important that we have artificial intelligence that's bounded by a series of really good guidelines that help it to be applied in a way that's transparent, it's explainable, it uses unbiased data sets. In fact, we've even recently published a book with a couple of our thought leaders. You can see a picture of it behind me, I think, called Human Plus Machine. It's put together and it talks about how do we actually create ethical AI, how do we actually guide ourselves as we're creating artificial intelligence to help to run and operate our businesses. And there's so many great examples of the ways that this can be done right, and there's plenty of examples, as you pointed out, where things can go very wrong as well. Our belief is that if you apply artificial intelligence and build it using systems which are explainable, that you have data sets that look at the diversity of human population or the diversity of experience rather than narrow data sets, that you end up with a solution that's right, and it's based on reasoning, and it's something that we can all be proud of running our companies, our governments, and our enterprises on it. You know, we actually have a trend in our technology vision this year that we call Citizen AI, or Raise Your AI Right, because we look at it and say, AI is actually kind of like kids, and I have children, which I assume you probably do too. It's actually really important that we raise this correctly, and based on the information that we feed it, based on the way that it actually grows up, that's the way it's going to behave in the future. And hey, you know what? These things are going to be our digital spokespeople out in the internet. It's actually really important that we bring them up in the right ways.
Sure, but the thing is still that when you've got all this conversation going on about GDPR, data protection, when you've got Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook fronting congressional hearings and hearings in the EU, when you have so much concern over data going walking. I mean, we're not even talking about AI, and already those ethical issues are with us. If we can't solve them, what's the chance that we can solve the ones for AI?
Actually, I tell you that AI is probably one of the ways in which we're going to solve some of these privacy issues. Frankly, the volume of data that is coming at us every day, the number of places where your information, my personal information, is actually stored and persisted around the world is multiplying every month, every 2 months. It's increasing at a dramatic pace. You can't possibly keep track of these things. In fact, human beings are ill-equipped to deal with the volume of information that's in front of us every day. Artificial intelligence is actually purpose-built for exactly that type of thing, to look for patterns inside of enormous volumes of data. So when you talk about the challenges that we have with data privacy, when we talk about the problems that we have with exposing information that you didn't want to be, or the right to be forgotten, AI is actually going to help us fix these problems. It's not part of the issue.
Okay, you know, this almost sounds like the gun debate. It's not, it's not AI that kills people. It's the programmers who do. I mean, do you foresee that as an issue? And again, are we really in a position to be able to nip this in the bud?
Oh, look, there's no doubt in my mind that you probably could do damage and wrong with AI, and I have no doubt that certain places around the world will probably experiment with that. But look, when we think about the enterprise, when we think about corporations, many of them intend to, and they have perspectives where they try to operate as good corporate citizens. Accenture does that as well. And when we look at AI and the way that we will introduce it out into the market, the types of things that we work on for our clients, we value it against a framework and say, are we doing the right things? Is the data sets in which we're training against, are they unbiased? Is the information and the decisions which are being made by AI, can we actually explain them at the end of the day? And is it ethical and moral, the types of changes that we're introducing investing into it. This is going to be the part of the future, whether you or I want it to be or not. I think it's important that we put the right guardrails and boundaries around it, and I believe Accenture is a pioneer in that space, and there's a lot of great information out there that we've published recently in this space. But I think that for any corporation looking to get started in this area, one of the very first things they should be doing is thinking about what are the boundaries we're going to put on it. These are board level topics.
They are indeed. Just a couple more. One is about self-driving cars. I know they're not necessarily all that intelligent. Sometimes they're better than the human drivers, but still, in the US, as you'd be aware, different states have different ways of regulating self-driving cars. In some states, the car must be able to switch back to a human. In other states, that's not the requirement. Given the global world that we're in, and the fact that AI doesn't have to exist in the physical space, how difficult is it going to be to, we talk about ethics, I mean, how many yardsticks do you have to measure that by? How are we going to, in a globalized world, enforce some of these ethical behaviors by AI when we can't even get it right on a state-by-state basis for self-driving cars?
I mean, it's a great question, but it's also about trust. If you want to be a business that's respected by consumers, if you want to be, for example, Amazon, and allow consumers of you, allow those consumers to actually unlock the door of your house or unlock your trunk to deliver packages, there's a huge amount of trust I put in those enterprises. And frankly, you're going to see the same thing with governments and enterprises in their application of AI. Consumers are smart. We're social animals these days. It will become blatantly obvious which companies are applying AI in very ethical and correct manners according to the norms of society, and perhaps others which are not. And those others will either have a choice of correcting the way that they are, or they're going to lose a lot of business partners and a lot of consumers. You can't keep that stuff under wraps. So I think there's going to be a lot of peer pressure in this space and a lot of government pressure to do it. I think one thing is really important here, though, is that in many ways, corporations are actually ahead of many governments around the world in terms of how we're going to address the challenges of AI. It's important that we are actually doing that we're leading the charge here. If we wait for the governments to catch up and do this thing, I really think that it's going to be problematic for us, and you'll see a lot more regulation come in. So to some extent, enterprises, corporations, startups,
Accenture,
we're the ones that have to be setting the standard and making sure that there's not problems to go and address.
So what are you doing concretely to set that standard?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when we look at, for example, even our training around artificial intelligence, there's a whole section of our training that deals just with ethical AI. How do you explain the data set in which you're using? Where are you retrieving the information from? How do you test? Can you explain the way that this is actually done? You look at the way that we're publishing documentation and thought leadership in this space as well. Even in our Tech Vision this year, where we have an entire section devoted to ethical AI. So
Tech Vision is your annual report on technology trends.
Yes, exactly right. So our Technology Vision just published a few months ago. In fact, I spoke about it earlier today here. A whole part of this Tech Vision this year is about how do we actually create a social contract with our employees, with our customers, and with our business partners as well. And that social contract has to include how we're going to use artificial intelligence in the future, and then we have to abide by those guidelines. I think it's up to enterprises and businesses like Accenture, and we're, I believe, a pioneer in this space, to really get out in front of this and talk about the issue and sit down with our other corporate peers and say, how are we going to tackle this among ourselves and self-regulate?
So finally then, how are you concretely doing that internally? Do you have like a committee, an ethics committee? Do you have a chief ethics officer? Do you get all your 470,000 staff involved? How does it work?
Sure. Well, we have all of those things. We have chief ethics and compliance folks, and we have others which are helping us set the guidelines for this. But maybe the biggest thing that we've got is we've got a chief technology officer that couldn't be more passionate about this topic. So much so that he spent much of last year putting together a book called Human Plus Machine that talks about how we're going to work together in the future world.
Right, and in fact that book is just behind you. Let me just get it. This is the book here, and when people come here, incidentally, you can still get a copy if you're here with us at the Sands Expo and Convention Center in the next hour and a half. You can take a selfie and you get a free book when you publish it on the Twitter feed or LinkedIn profile. Here is the book. Adam, thank you again for your time. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Adam Burden, who's the Global Technology Officer at Accenture, and I'm Mark Laudi here live at the Accenture exhibit at the Innovfest Unbound 2018 convention in Singapore.
It really is a great